There's certain things when it comes to football that when I hear this, I get really excited. And I think SMU is going to have a really good season because of it.
You are Locked On SMU, your daily podcast on the SMU Mustangs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? A Wednesday edition. Welcome into Locked On SMU, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. My name's Grayson Singleton. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com/LockedOnCollege for 50% off your first year. Coming up on the show today, I'm going to give you the main reason why I think I would take SMU over Miami. I'll tell you the context. We're going to talk about that in just a second. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that in the show. And Josh Pate has released his top 20. There's a trend with him. There's a trend with me. We're going to talk about what talking heads prioritize when it comes to projecting a team season. So there's a contrast between him and I. I'll tell you about that at the end of the show. Let's go ahead and jump right in and get started with this. So what's the latest out of fall camp for SMU down there in Dallas? And I say down there in Dallas because obviously I do this show from Norman, Oklahoma. And because of that, I rely on intel that reporters give us from fall practice. That's kind of a normal thing in this industry. So I got to give credit to Billy Embody, who I have not had the pleasure of meeting yet, haven't talked to him before, but does a phenomenal job keeping SMU fans abreast of what's going on down there at fall camp. So we're going to get to some of the second and third storylines here in just a second, but when I hear this sentence, I get real excited. Offensive line is a unit that has to be the communication, all that's got to be tight with the offensive line. And one way that I can predict trouble for a team in the upcoming season is if the offensive line is a jumbled, inconsistent mess during fall camp. If your offensive line is shuffling around, if your offensive line is injured and you're experimenting a bunch, there's going to be some experimental periods. Don't get me wrong. Everything doesn't need to be perfect. But if there is consistent shuffling, reshuffling, this guy in, this guy out, that is a gigantic red flag for me. That's probably more of a red flag than a quarterback competition going into a season. I called it last year with Oklahoma. I was like, this offensive line doesn't look right. They were injured going into fall practice. They were injured all through fall practice, going into the regular season. That spells trouble for me. So when I hear this, the offensive line appears to be pretty settled, at least from our vantage point. Savion Byrd, Logan Parr, Josh Bates, who came over from Oklahoma, Addison Nichols, and P.J. Williams is our bet to start left to right against East Texas A&M. The offensive line appears to be pretty settled. Love it. And you should too. Because now that we got who the 5 are, we are, 2 weeks away from game week? This Saturday is going to be the 16th. Yeah, game week is the 30th. You're 2 weeks away, and we know who the starting 5 are likely going to be. Bravo. Round of applause. That's a huge green flag for SMU. Because there's a lot of turnover on this SMU team. Offensive line is where I would love to be able to say the more things change, the more they stay the same. I would love that latter part to be emblematic of your offensive line. And you got 2 really good players, Logan Parr and P.J. Williams. Addison Nichols, pretty good too. Joshua Bates, I think, kind of got lost in the shuffle at Oklahoma and was also one of the guys that was hurt. But going into that 2024 season, Josh Bates was a name to watch for Oklahoma's offensive line. So he's no scrub that was just kicked aside by an SEC team. Just kind of didn't really work. But a settled offensive line in front of a quarterback, which, interesting segue, stick with me for about 10 more seconds. A settled offensive line with a quarterback who's getting better and looks better, with an offensive coordinator that you already have chemistry with, man, that is just foundation on top of foundation. That is rock solid. That is one of my key predictors and one of my key indicators that a team is about to have a really good year, or at minimum is going to get off to a really good start, is when you don't have to work through offensive line miscues and offensive line dyssynergy. So love that for SMU coming out of fall camp. The quarterback, just mentioned that. Kevin Jennings, the fact that he's bigger and stronger, I think is huge, because we haven't seen him even try to go through a full season. Now, last I looked, Kevin Jennings was 6'2", 192 pounds. So basically, he probably is at a much lower body, not much lower, but a lower body fat percentage than I am, but around my same size. And he needed to get bigger. And let's look up SMU's roster right now and just see what he's listed at, or if they've made any update to it, because I believe he was about 192 the last time I looked this up. 6 foot 192. Okay. He was 175 last year, something like that. That's a massive body recomposition. I'll tell you that right now. I mean, that is some serious muscle. And from all indications, his arm has benefited from that as well, as his zip on his throws has been better. And you love that for a guy. We went through the Pro Football Focus numbers a couple of weeks ago. If you remember, 55% of his passes were clocked as inaccurate. Arm strength and zip could certainly help with that, especially with timing and getting the ball through tight windows, getting the ball to receivers on time. Because you may release it on time, but you may not have the velocity to get it there on time. So that's huge for Kevin Jennings, who, again, continues to set the tone and be the leader of this team. As we projected all summer, is that him going through an entire offseason being the dude is going to translate at minimum to him having more command with the football team. So I've got an offensive line that's settled. I've got a quarterback who's in command. By the way, before we move off of quarterback, I found this very interesting, again, from Billy and Body down there. Wisconsin transfer Tyler Van Dyke is still very limited, which was expected. So it'll be the true freshman Ty Hawkins as the backup, along with Charlie Pfizer in the early goings of the season. Here's what he said about Hawkins, because I don't think we've done a Hawkins update. He shows signs of brilliance and has plenty of arm talent, along with better running ability than the other quarterbacks, which, yes, that would be predictable. That said, he also looks like a freshman at times as far as processing and decision-making. Cool. No panic whatsoever. I'm cool with that. Show us the raw talent as a true freshman. Show us the raw talent, and we'll work on the processing and decision-making. Hopefully, there is not a world where we see Ty Hawkins this year. There doesn't need to be one. Redshirt him, and here's how you should have confidence in Ty Hawkins' development. If Kevin Jennings makes the jump in progression and decision-making that we expect him to make, then who's to say Rhett Lashley and Casey Woods, De'Aaron King, that hierarchy of coaches, can't do the same with Ty Hawkins? I think Ty is going to be just fine, but we should not see him this year. Hopefully, if in the unfortunate hypothetical world something happens to Kevin Jennings, it's later on in the year. You can get the veteran Tyler Van Dyke in there to spell him until he's able to get back healthy. But hopefully you don't see Ty Hawkins this year. Let him progress. Let him learn progression and decision-making, and he'll be just fine. Another piece of news that I wanted to get to before we close out this first segment is running back, because Chris Johnson Jr. seems to be having the strongest camp. Chris Johnson Jr., and I had to go back and look up his stats this morning. He caught the ball more times than he carried the ball last season at Miami. He played 2 seasons at Miami, and he carried the ball 17 times. He caught the ball 11 times total, scored 2 touchdowns. Very, very adept playmaker in the open field. So I like that. Now, I predicted, just threw in a blind prediction, that Derek McFall was going to win the running back job. If I'm wrong, cool. Derek McFall to me seems like a guy who can make those all around plays. Chris Johnson is older. Chris Johnson, I believe, is bigger. Obviously, has had at least more experience in a college running back room. So if he wins the job, I'm not gonna say anything about that. I love it because I think if you're beating out a guy who was slated to rise up the depth chart with the graduation of Brashard Smith, if you beat out that guy, it's pretty cool. One last thing on the running backs. Then you get to the newcomers, TJ Harden and Jermichael Green. This is quoting directly, who are coming along. It's a good bet that the most well-rounded back will be Harden, the UCLA transfer, who is just getting into the offense. Again, he got into the program late. That doesn't mean he'll be the starter, but at least seems to be the most well-rounded. Green, a former four-star prospect, got nicked up lately, so he's battling through that. But it won't be a surprise if everyone looks up and he's playing a serious amount of snaps in the season. There you go. A four-horse running back room. Excellent offensive line, quarterback is progressing, and the running back room is going to be fine after you lose one of the better offensive contributors in the ACC. And coming up next, is there a world where the college football playoff includes Miami but doesn't include SMU? I'm telling you why I don't think so, coming up next. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, property, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving serious money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. You think of all those subscriptions you have: Netflix, Hulu, YouTube TV, and then we get to music, and then we get to all the other ones you just forgot you even started. Monarch Money can help with that. It can easily spot subscriptions you don't even use, and you can even cancel those. And this has saved me tons of money. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. Back here on Locked On SMU, thanks for taking some time out of your day to spend with us. And go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel so we can continue to grow this community. Check out the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. As this podcast, I know, coming out an hour late at 9 a.m. instead of the usual 8 a.m. today. So I apologize for that. But make sure you click that notification bell so you get notified of whenever we release new content on YouTube. That will still release at noon every single Monday through Friday. On3 released their projection for the 12-team college football playoff field. Did this a couple of days ago. They used that using the AP poll. So even though On3 is there's a little bit of opinion in here, but they're going to use the first AP poll, which, okay, fine, cool. The 12-team field is projected based on the 5 highest ranked conference champs and the highest ranked teams in general. So I'm just going to say this right now. There is no SMU in this field. Number 1 is the SEC champion, Texas. Number 2 is the Big Ten champion, Penn State, which I still don't really know how you rank Penn State ahead of Ohio State without seeing the teams on the field first. But all right, cool. Ohio State, by the way, is 3. Clemson, the projected ACC champ, is number 4. Georgia at 5, Notre Dame, Oregon, Alabama, LSU, Miami, Arizona State, who is the Big 12 champion, and Boise State, who is the Mountain West champion. So there you go. Now, obviously, SMU is on the outside looking in of this, and it will probably come down, unless something unforeseen happens, it will come down to Miami and SMU, because I don't know if there's going to be a world where all 3, Clemson, Miami, and SMU, get into the college football playoff. I could be wrong. There is a distinct possibility that that happens. I just don't think it's going to be the case. So you're basically looking at a battle of Miami versus SMU. And here's why I would choose SMU over Miami. Is it starting to seem to anybody that Mario Cristobal is becoming the next James Franklin? Here's what I mean by that. If there is a coach in all of college football who is pegged as the guy who can't win the big game over the last 5+ years or so, the first coach that comes to mind, or at least within the first 3, is none other than James Franklin. I mean, every time Penn State gets into a big game, the narrative is, no matter who the opponent is, the narrative is, well, it's James Franklin, and they're not going to win it because James Franklin can't win big games. You guys have heard this before, right? You guys have probably participated in the proliferation of that sort of narrative. And by the way, I can't blame you. I really can't, because James Franklin seems to kind of come up short in moments like that. So it makes sense. Now, he did get the monkey off his back winning a couple of big games last year, even though they eventually lost in the college football playoff. But he did win some big games. I'll give credit where credit is due there. But when it comes to Mario Cristobal, not only has he not shown a consistent propensity for winning big games, he has shown a consistent propensity for coming up short in the wildest of ways. Go back to when they should have just taken a knee. Oops, that didn't happen. Haynes King bombs them with a Hail Mary last year. Georgia Tech beats Miami. Like Mario Cristobal, at least James Franklin doesn't win the big games by just getting outplayed in terms of football. And those usually come against Michigan and Ohio State, which isn't really a cardinal sin in college. Mario Cristobal, on the other hand, just has the funkiest ways of finding ways to lose. And that, to me, is concerning. Now, look, he's got a new quarterback, Carson Beck, who I believe has some good college football left to be played. I've said that before. Do I think Miami is the most well-built, perfectly built team? Nope, I do not. I have my radio show on weekdays here in Norman. I filled in on the afternoon show a couple of days ago with former OU linebacker. Some of you guys might remember this name, Teddy Lehman, from the late 90s and early 2000s. Filled in with him, and we were going down the AP Top 25 as it pertained to Oklahoma. The one that stuck out to him was Miami at number 10. He thinks Miami is going to be in for a huge pitfall because he doesn't think that Miami's going to be better. Let's pull up the top 25. He doesn't think Miami's going to end up being better than Arizona State. I think Arizona State's the iffy one here. He doesn't think they'll be better than Illinois or South Carolina, maybe Michigan. And I think Michigan's overranked. I think Florida is overranked, but I think there is a world where they could be better than Miami. I think Miami may be the most overrated team, especially after talking to him. I think Miami might be the most overrated team in this AP Top 25. Because even though I think their quarterback is going to play well, I can also admit that that is a projection. Because Carson Beck, the last time we saw him, was not very good. Now, he wasn't god-awful like a lot of people will categorize him to be. He was not that bad. But he was not great. And I expected him to be great because I expected him to be the number one quarterback taken in the NFL draft this year. Obviously, that doesn't happen. He tears up his UCL, so he's got to come back to college. But when I look at up and down history of the quarterback and an even more concerning up and down history of the coach, I don't know how much faith in Miami I'm going to have when they go on the road to play Clemson. Miami has proven to be, at minimum, a team that can play 3 quarters of really good football. And the fourth quarter is a Rolodex of we could play really good and finish this thing, or we could finish this thing in the worst possible football way ever imaginable to mankind. And I'm going to bank on that inconsistency as to why SMU will get the better of Miami. Now, what does that say about SMU as we close this segment out? Does SMU finish every single game on top? Well, I'll tell you this. They finish games very well. Look at the ACC championship game. They finished that game very well. It took a miracle 56-yarder, the longest kick of the season for that guy, to bury SMU. They won close games, a close game on the road at Duke, where they didn't play their best through the first 3 quarters, but they found a way to do it. I think SMU and Rhett Lashlee, by the way, Rhett Lashlee just a more emotionally even keel guy than Mario Cristobal, which I put a lot of stock in, especially these days. That's an opinion I've generated as I've gotten older. I'll take Rhett Lashlee and their ability to finish, especially with continuity at quarterback and at a defense as good as they have. I'll take that over what I've seen from Miami. Hands down, no question. Coming up next, Josh Pate has released his top 20. He and I value different things, and we'll talk about what they are and how it pertains to SMU coming up next year on Locked On SMU. Closing up shop on a Wednesday here on Locked On SMU, Josh Pate has released the first JP Top 20 poll of the 2025 year. And here's how it stands. Texas is number 1, Ohio State 2, Georgia 3, Penn State, Alabama, Notre Dame, Oregon, Clemson, Florida, and Oklahoma. Now you're going to start to see some inconsistency at 9 when it comes to Josh Pate. Well, number 1, I think Clemson should be higher. Florida and Oklahoma are teams that I'm iffy on, but we'll talk about that in a second. He has SMU all the way down at 20, the last team that he ranks in his poll. Here are the teams that are slightly ahead of SMU. USC at 15, Michigan at 16, South Carolina at 17, who I think is underrated. By the way, he's got Texas A&M all the way up at 13. Tennessee at 18, Kansas State at 19. Let's break all this down. Tennessee is not going to finish the season as a top 25 team. Michigan has a true freshman quarterback. South Carolina should be higher. Tennessee has a quarterback situation that I don't like at all. Kansas State, I think, is just going to end up being Kansas State. So what does this mean in terms of what Pate values versus me? Well, I will say this. Here's what I value. I value projection through continuity. And that's going to make a lot of sense to you guys that have watched these episodes day in and day out. Thank you for being an everyday listener. But projection through continuity is a big thing in college football. And that's why I'm high on SMU. Because I am projecting with SMU that coach, coordinator, quarterback stays the same. And I can project progression through that, especially through the quarterback, because they've got the right guys coming back in the right positions. We talked about the offensive line. Not a whole lot of newcomers there. I think Bates might be the only one, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody correct me if I get that wrong. But your offensive line is a bunch of dudes who have already been there. The receiver room, for the most part, dudes who have been there or dudes in their first year in the program, because there's going to be true freshmen with SMU that I think make an impact at wide receiver. So guys who have only known being in the program, aside from Romello Brinson, who is a transfer from, I believe, Miami. But the tight end room is guys who have been in the program. Matthew Hibner, RJ Maryland. Defense is led by guys who have been in the program. Isaiah Wakobe, Ahmad Moses back there. Cam Robertson elevating into that leadership role at defensive end. Alex Kilgore, who's patiently waited his turn in this program, right? Obviously, quarterback as well. So I value that. When you look at a lot of these teams ahead of SMU, it seems like Josh Pate, and again, haven't talked to him, don't know him, but it seems like Josh Pate values recent buzz and momentum. Because how else do you explain Florida at 9, Oklahoma at 10, which, by the way, yesterday was a crazy day in Norman. How do you explain USC at 15? That's got to be recent buzz. Michigan, that's got to be recent buzz. I mean, that's a true freshman starting quarterback with Bryce Underwood. Now, Michigan's going to be really, really solid everywhere else. I believe that just based on Michigan reputation. Tennessee at 18, that one doesn't make any sense to me. I know Tennessee's got some dudes coming back. They also have lost a lot of dudes, and their quarterback is Joey Aguilar, which kind of a downgrade from Nico Iamaleava. Kansas State is going to be good old reliable Kansas State. Now, whether that means that good old reliable carries them to an 11-win season, or the good old reliable means they lose some really close games in heartbreaking fashion and win 8 games remains to be seen. But look at the teams that I'm high on this season. And I know I haven't broached this from a macro perspective, but I'll tell you the teams that I'm really, really high on. Clemson, I'm really, really high on. I cannot wait till SMU plays Clemson. Alabama, I'm really high on this year. Ohio State, I might be really high on. And Texas, I'm extremely high on this year. Outside of the top 10, LSU, I think, is going to be a dark horse national championship contender. South Carolina, I'm really high on. What is the constant in all of those? Quarterback been in the program with the head coach or play caller, and a lot of continuity around them. Texas has that. Clemson has that. Clemson's built on that, really. Alabama has that because I think Ty Simpson is the operative guy to run Kalen DeBoer's system of offense there. LSU has that. South Carolina definitely has that, even though they lost some dudes, some really key players from a year ago. That's my philosophy, is in this day in college football, when you graduate players, and that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to roster turnover because of the transfer portal, I value as much continuity, especially between coach and quarterback, as you can get. And in a situation like a Texas where all their coordinators are back, SMU where all their coordinators are back, I tend to give those teams a boost in terms of where I can project them to fall as the season continues to go on. Because, look, you're already ahead of the curve in terms of your installation of what you want your program to be, because your players can more perfectly be a filter of that if they've been in the program and in the system. Oklahoma is an interesting one because John Mateer comes over with his offensive coordinator from Washington State. We also have to figure out whether or not Washington State stuff is going to work in the SEC, even though Ben Arbuckle seems like he's going to be a pretty good offensive coordinator. And he's a pretty creative dude, but remains to be seen. And that offense is transfer heavy out the wazoo. Go look at the roster if you want to. But a lot of the teams I'm high on, you're going to continue to hear me talk about this during the college football season. The Texases of the world until I'm proven wrong. Ohio State's until I'm proven wrong. LSU, Clemson, South Carolina, SMU. All of those teams, until I'm proven wrong, I'm going to be high on them because of projecting progression through continuity. That's how I value stuff in college football. And that's why I've got some of those teams a little bit higher, and I would drop some of those teams in Josh Pate's rankings. That's how I do it. That's my formula. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for watching a Wednesday edition of Locked On SMU. Be sure to check us out on the podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. By the way, for your second listen of the day, go check out the portal with Brian Smith. Locked On's the portal, keeps you updated on everything going on in the world of college football. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody. Take it easy.